morning, Deputy Mayor and councillors, CEO, directors, ladies and gentlemen. The traditional custodians of this wonderful place we call home, our Valley the Iwi people, represent a human connection dating back over 2,500 generations. And when we come together as a community, and particularly as the council, we pay our respects to our traditional custodians and honour their elders past, present and those emerging. So this council meeting is being streamed live in accordance with the council's standing orders. It's being recorded and published. We welcome our online audience. We welcome the members of the public gallery here today. And if you are attending today, you are giving your consent to your image and your voice being recorded and published in accordance with the council's standing orders. We're also required to tell you that you may be subject to legal action if your actions or comments are deemed inappropriate or unacceptable, which I'm sure they will. So thank you very much. I declare the meeting open, and we welcome today, I think for the last time in Mackay, Captain Stephen and Captain Lydia Spencer from the Salvation Army to open our meeting in prayer.
Father God,
we come to you today in this collective manner to continue the governance of this community.
we pray for wisdom and guidance for the elected and the collective staff and volunteers for the Mackay Council.
Grant each person humility and knowledge to discern the needs of the people in accordance with the laws of this land.
Father, the future is uncertain for many within this community. State federal government's position on COVID-19 vaccinations is indeed at the forefront of many people's minds here in Mackay, the place we call home. My prayer is that this learned council will guide these people through these uncertain days ahead.
As it is our last chance to be with this body of people, we offer this benediction as a way of saying thank you for having us in this community. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen. Stephen and Lydia, just so we can get it in the council minutes for the day, thank you very much for your 5 years in Mackay. We wish you good blessings for the next part of your journey, but your contribution to our community has been significant in the last 5 years, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to say farewells before you leave in January, but from us as a council, thank you.
Thank you.
So there's nobody absent on council business, there's no apologies. Councillors, are there any condolences? No condolences. Anybody got a conflict of interest to declare? None, thank you. Let's move on to the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting the 10th of November. They've been circulated. We've had nothing back from those minutes, so would somebody like to move that the minutes be adopted? Councillor Mann moves, seconded by Councillor Green. Those in favour? Any against? Motion is carried. The business arising out of those minutes have been circulated as well, and they're part of this agenda. It's only one page from the questions arising out of the last meeting. Okay, so we'll move on. I do have a Mayoral minute to table at this stage, councillors. We've also got members of the public actually registered to talk. It's about what the Mayoral minute is concerned. So I'm happy to bring the talking to an agenda item forward so that we can allow members of the public to talk at this stage and before we actually debate the Mayoral minute that we're going to have before us today. So, ladies and gentlemen, the rules of engagement are that you have 3 minutes. This is not an interactive session. You have 3 minutes to present to council. As I said, it's not an interactive session, and your 3 minutes will be exactly time that you'll have to finish at that stage. So we're happy to hear what you have to say at this point of the council meeting, and we'll start with John Van Polen. So if you just state your name and address, and we know what you want to talk about, it's COVID.
Good morning, your worship and councillors. My name is John Van Polen. I reside at 510 Mirracane Drive, Freshwater Point. I'm a local business owner in the Mackay region. Our business is family owned and operated and was formed back in May 2012. I'm here today to talk about the mandates that are being forced upon the people of your electorate. Since the announcement from the State Premier that the mandate being introduced on the 17th of December, there's been great concern from both business owners and the people of the Mackay community who are in your electorate. You would see this by the amount of people who are forming and protesting on the weekend in Mackay at the whalebones. There are over 6,500 people. That's only the ones that could show up due to other commitments that other people would be having. There'll probably be another 10 whom are of the same opinion about being forced to undertake the experimental medical procedure. I've not personally heard from anyone who's taken a vaccine because they are in fear of the virus. They feel they're being coerced to take the vaccine so they do not lose their jobs, their livelihoods, and the ability to provide for their family, as well as being fear of fines or community segregation and not being able to see their family and loved ones. Business owners are in fear from rebellion during, I'm a bit nervous here, so yeah. Business owners are in fear from rebellion due to having to ask people for their private information, which is against 1988 Privacy Act, Section 94H. And to not let someone into your business premises is against the Disability and Discrimination Act 1992, Section 4 and 6. They are also well aware that the ability falls on them, or the liability falls on them, the employer, for any and all adverse effects that may happen as a result of the direction to make vaccinations mandatory to their employees. Oh, I could go on with more breaches of our human rights and various acts. I'm bloody so nervous here, sorry. But I believe council members are aware of this. What I'm asking as a community member and a business owner who employs over 140 people in the Mackay region, and is a big contributor to the community and sporting clubs. We as the community and business owners are here talking for the people and ask, will you reject these illegal vaccination mandates that are being forced upon us from the electorate from the Premier? As we feel they'll create great community divide, family problems, increase in mental health issues, increase the already too high suicidal rate. Following the Premier's request for Queensland councils to provide local feedback on her proposed COVID-19 restrictions from December 17th, what is council's response? Thank you for your time, Mr. Van Hollen.
Thanks, Mr. Van Hollen. Gavin Cass. Just state your name and full name and address, please, Gavin.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Gav Cass. I live at 16 Marcella Street in Riverview. I'm a local business owner and commercial property owner here in Mackay. Collectively, between myself and my tenants, we employ approximately 25 local people. I'm also a father and a grandfather and the grandson of a Second World War veteran who fought to defend our country and ensure our freedoms for future generations. I am not an anti-vaxxer. Will council follow? My question to council is this: will council follow the Livingstone Shire's move to oppose the state government's proposed regulations set for introduction on December 17? To clarify this, I would like to read to you all their resolution from their special meeting minutes held on the 18th of November. Item 11.1 of that meeting was the COVID-19 restrictions on the 17th of December 2021. The summary from Mayor Andy Ireland has submitted a notice of motion in relation to the COVID-19 restrictions on the 17th of December 2021. The council resolution is as follows: that following the Premier's offer to Queensland councils to provide feedback on her government's proposal to introduce the COVID-19 restriction for unvaccinated persons from the 17th of December 2021, the Livingstone Shire Council advises that A. Several hundred business owners within the Central Queensland region attended a meeting at Yeppoon on Monday the 15th of November 2021 and expressed strong and unreserved concern about the impacts that new restrictions will have on businesses, patrons and employees. A medical procedure should be an individual's choice, and an employer should not be forced to exclude valued employees from the workplace for exercising that choice. Point C, these restrictions will hinder Queensland's economic recovery by not allowing full participation following the reopening of the borders. Point D, the restrictions will also hinder businesses to the point of closure in some instances, operating at full potential as regional Queensland's pool of employee candidates will be reduced by the new restrictions. The final point, E, local businesses remain unsure about their obligations and liabilities for their employees under the workplace health and safety legislation. Moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Eastwood. Motion carried unanimously. In closing, I have just 3 words, lest we forget.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Dan Shaw.
Your Worship, Lord Mayor, councillors and members of the public viewing. I come before you today as a father, business owner and concerned citizen. We're in uncharted waters. Our beliefs, whether cultural, spiritual or learned, are being challenged and even questioned. We're being placed in situations like never before, divided against our will. Mates against mates, work colleagues against work colleagues, and even family against family. Today as a father I hurt. I'm sad that due to the pandemic have been kept from my children for almost 12 months. I see and hear young children having been pressured with decisions far beyond their own, or due to the restrictions imposed by the states. As a businessman, employer and community ambassador, I'm in conflict against the state's inconsistent mandate that is set to drive a wedge through our democracy and the firm stand this great country's leader who refutes community mandate restrictions on the citizens of Australia. Our Prime Minister stands fast honouring the freedoms our forefathers fought for: freedom of choice, freedom of movement and freedom of speech. As a concerned citizen, I stand here pleading with you, fathers, mothers, citizens. Hear what is put forward to you today, hear the concerns and sense within the word. For just one moment, park the hype. Listen with an open heart, not just for the words of us 5 men and women, not the 6,500 that were on the lawn on Saturday, not the hundreds of thousands that represented the community globally. I ask for your support this call, as if your every waking right, your very own personal freedoms were being jeopardised, because they are. If we as a community, a small, diverse, inclusive community, don't stop this inconsistent, discriminative mandate, we'll all lose. I ask, is this not your duty as elected officials to work with the community, no matter how small the number or quiet the voice, to strive what's for best for all the members of this great region, to seek the best outcome? I'm sure freedom of choice is. I received a response email with a question that the Mackay official response was that this is a matter of state and federal law that we don't get involved in. As we just heard, Livingston Shire has set the precedent. They will not discriminate, nor should we. I ask you this, will you stand by your community's voice? Will you stand by for the freedom of movement, freedom of choice, that the very freedoms we were born with, that are being withered away, stand for the Mackay community and be proud to say we will not discriminate. I ask you to denounce the Queensland State Government's December 19 COVID-19 mandate by saying Mackay is an all-inclusive community. We do not discriminate. We do not divide, ridicule, force the will of others and segregate. We stand united as one region under one flag, under one federal law.
Mr. Shaw, thank you very much. Your 3 minutes. And just for the record, you are at 81 Ocean Avenue, Slay Point?
81 Ocean Avenue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Richard Adams, just state your name and your address, please, Richard.
Good morning, Your Worship and Councillors. My name is Richard Adams and I reside at 85 Pacific Drive at Salonga Beach. I'm a small business owner in the Mackay district, employing 6 staff. Firstly, let me say, I find it difficult to accept the need to be having this conversation in our beautiful town, in the best state of what used to be the best nation on earth, pleading for our very birthright, our freedom. Due in part to the current situation, I'm working a second job to support myself and my staff and to keep the doors open for my customers. In one fell swoop, both my day job and my business are in jeopardy, as I know many others will be, not only through loss of income, but also the possible imposition of illegal and unrealistic fines which may be forced upon any business not going along with the narrative. Small business in this region are already suffering financial stress. One only has to visit the city heart to confirm this. I implore this council to look beyond what has been passed as facts concerning the COVID crisis. Can anyone please tell me how many active cases are in our medical facilities, how many cases of adverse effects of the jab, And does this warrant the extreme measures about to be imposed on us? Thank you for your time, and please let reason be your guide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. Dan Shaw. We've had you. You're listed twice.
I'm happy to go.
That doesn't mean you get 6 minutes, Dan. No, sorry. Okay. Christine Keys.
Your Worship and Councillors,
Name and address, please, Christine.
my name is Christine Keys. I live at Eagle Mount Retirement Resort, 12 Harveys Road, Beaconsfield. Now I'd like to read to you a version of the letter that I sent to the Mayor Monday this week. On Saturday, 20th of November, a peaceful rally and march was held in Mackay, beginning at Blue Water Quay. This event was hosted by the Worldwide Rally for Freedom, Mackay, with the purpose of expressing our disapproval of the illegal mandates being placed upon us and of the freedoms of which we are being robbed. It was supported in huge numbers, and we had around 6,600 in attendance. This is not an anti-vaccination group. Many of the people who attended have been vaccinated, and for various reasons. Many, however, have received the so-called vaccination under duress and coercion, caused by the threat of losing their livelihoods. No human should ever be forced to have any drug put into their bodies, much less one which is still in the experimental stage. And to be living in what is meant to be a democracy, and to be told that, if unvaccinated, you are not permitted to enter many shops and places of service or entertainment, is not only dictatorial, but a breach of our human rights. As a group, we have seen the success of Yeppoon this week, last week now, when the Livingston Shire Council passed a motion to make Yeppoon a pro-choice area. We have many business owners and people from other walks of life who are extremely upset about this prospect, which is apparently coming into play on December 17th. The number of people at our rally on Saturday indicates the strength of this feeling. We are calling on you, as the Mayor and as councillors, to attend a public meeting of concerned people to discuss this and to lead the way in implementing the same pro-choice regulations here in Mackay. There is obviously a sense of urgency in regard to this matter, so we await notice from you of a suitable time slot and place where we could meet with you. There is no law that states mandatory COVID vaccinations can be justified, as to do so encroaches on other liberties, laws and rights that exist in Australia. Taking away people's privileges is a complete breach of their rights, and no one should have to choose to be discriminated against due to their medical status. The statements by politicians that those who are not vaccinated are a threat to public health and should be locked out of society and denied the ability to work are not measures to protect public health. And note, politicians themselves are exempt from this so-called vaccination. This alone proves it has nothing to do with health. My question is, will the Mayor and councillors meet with the many concerned business owners for which you work in the city of Mackay? Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Christine. All right, so that's all the public participation listed to speak about the COVID item. Councillors, on the table, the Mayoral Minute, the background of the Mayoral Minute. Whilst we respect that there is a personal choice, Mackay Regional Council has always promoted vaccination and will continue to support the Mackay Hospitals and Health Service in encouraging residents to get vaccinated in order to protect themselves and their families. Council is, however, very concerned about the lack of clarity and detail from the state government regarding how the new COVID measures and restrictions will be enforced from December 17. It's now been more than 2 weeks since the Premier announced plans for post-December 17. There is still no public health order providing the detail. So that lack of information is causing unrest in our community, as has been demonstrated. An absence of clarity is also impacting on our council plans and the provision of council facilities, services, operations and events. Council has sympathy for businesses, particularly small businesses in our region, and the effects that the threat of such restrictions will have and is having on them. We understand the business concerns, and we understand that their concerns are that after December 17, they will be required to enforce the government regulations and restrictions, and that they will be impacted by a lack of customers and staff. Councillors, I move that Council requests that the Premier urgently provides information and clarity on any public health order regarding COVID measures and requirements for local government and businesses post-December 17, 2021, and further, that any directive takes into account the operational impact on local government and businesses. It's a Mayoral impact, it's a Mayoral minute. It doesn't require a seconder. Is there a speaker against? Are there speakers to the Councillor Jones speaking to the minute?
Yes.
And for?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Look, in the past I've praised the Premier for keeping us safe for 2 years, only locking us down for 15 days. I've encouraged friends and family to consider the consequences on both sides regarding having or having not the vaccination. But at the end of the day, we live in a democratic nation, and I always state it's your choice. I will respect that. This motion, Your Worship, will seek some clarification and at this stressful time for our community for which I represent. Thank you, Your Worship.
Are there other speakers? Thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Ballard, speaking for the motion.
There's a few things I'd like to cover. I beg your indulgence in this. I congratulate you on saying that we are very strongly pro-vaccination. As some might know, I do have a very long career in the paramedical field, medical disciplines. I hear a number of things going on, and I just want to warn people, this virus is very real despite what people say, and the fact that there's no one in hospital here actually shows that the measures in place have worked. I use Austria and Germany as an example at the moment, low vaccination rates, going into total lockdown, with actually they're working through their constitution to make vaccination mandatory law. If you don't do it, you go to jail. Now, I would like to think we don't get to that stage, but I need people to be a bit realistic here. Firstly, system of government, it is not our responsibility. And despite Livingstone's motion or whatever, they will still be subject to whatever mandate, whatever directive the state government gives. So in people's research, I would suggest they research our system of government, the rights and responsibilities within. Suicide, I take offence at people mentioning suicide all the time. Suicide actually decreased last year because of increased services and whatever. To use suicide to promote your own agenda, I think is unconscionable. Apartheid, if you've spoken to anyone, we hear that used all the time at the moment, that's lived under apartheid, this is nothing like apartheid. Nazism, the measures we have taken are to protect the vulnerable, people that are likely to be impacted by this virus. If anyone wishes to research what happened with the Nazis, they killed tens of thousands of their own people before they worried about the Jews. So this is the furthest thing from Nazism you could possibly get. I've had emails talking about a sovereign state and we the people. Even if you take the 6,500 and maybe the 10 that didn't arrive, we have 120,000 people in the region. So this sovereign state would be basically instituted by a minority of people. And sorry, that's a dictatorship. That is not democracy. Democracy is the majority, and the majority of people have already been vaccinated. And even if you take a few percent off that say they were coerced or whatever, the majority has voluntarily become vaccinated. That is democracy. Trial vaccine, it's like renovating a house. If you renovate 1 day a week and your fund's limited, it may take you 10 years. If, however, you work 7 days a week, funds are unlimited, and the ability to gain materials, you might get it done in 3 months. I've actually had a little bit to do with trialling of things such as this many years ago in my uni days. This vaccine, because of the urgency, there were no limitations on resource, both financial and people, and actually getting people to undergo, to run as test subjects. When you're looking at your family and friends dying of a disease, you're quite happy to take a prospective cure. Side effects. I'd like to say to the people that are worried about the side effects that the side effects of the vaccine are, in actual fact, far less common and exactly the same as the mechanism of death that the virus brings. So the clotting, the myocarditis, and all of those sort of things happen anyway and far more likely to. Side effects, I'd suggest people actually look into mRNA and DNA and see how different they are. The reason it was called novel is because it's new. And of course, governments and medical services that may have made a few mistakes at the start. It was new. Immunity. I'll trust my immunity. Mate, that worked really well for Indigenous communities during the colonisation era. You know, if you don't have an immunity to a novel virus, you're pretty much shot to bits. It is a coronavirus. And no matter how many times you get the common cold, which is coronavirus, you're a chance of getting it again. So while we might be laughed at because we got vaccinated and we've got to have boosters, there is no booster. Every time, if you want to keep your immunity, you've got to catch the virus. And the problem with that, let's stop talking about deaths. It's disability. And that disability will be an expense on our government and health system for generations. This is why it is so important, and it will impact business, it will impact individuals, but the death rate is higher in certain cohorts. The disability rate is also very high. I have yet to see, and I have personal experience, yet to see someone who was intubated and whatever recover fully. You always have problems. It's like pneumonia. You get pneumonia, you're more likely to get it because the damage never repairs. So it's the disability. So coronavirus does its first turn. It kills a few. 10% of people have long-term disabilities. What happens next time it goes around? All of a sudden you're in that cohort. So every time you want your immunity, you've got to take the risk. Do the dance.
60 seconds.
The biggest thing I say, we hear about freedom and choice. Disability, by birth or by illness or accident, destroys freedom and choice. There are a large number of people out there, people with compromised immune systems, whom by people expressing their want for maximum freedoms, maximum choice, are actually limiting these people in the limited choice they already have. There's people out there that will not be able to attend businesses, that will not be able to go out of their room, their hospital. And the other thing is, ultimately, when hospitals are choked, as they will become, heaven help you if you have a heart attack or a car accident.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. Are there other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura, speaking for the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I, together with several other councillors yesterday, attended the North Queensland Bulk Ports Christmas event. And the CEO, Nicholas Fenton, spoke at the very start, spoke very well. But he also said that if you believe COVID's not real, he said, I can tell you it is. He spoke of his family member in France, back home, who is younger than he is, contracted COVID, was a professor at a university. It affected him so badly that he has recovered to the best he can, has lost half his lung capacity, and is now incapacitated and cannot work. So I'm very pleased your Mayoral Minute does say we are pro-vaccination, and we encourage Mackay Hospital Health Service in all their efforts to get continue to get vaccinations within our region. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bonaventura. Councillor Green,
Thank you, Your Worship.
speaking for the motion.
Yes, speaking for the motion and just bringing it back to the motion. Your Worship, I'd like to read aloud some passages of some of the feedback myself and I know other councillors have recently received to highlight the confusion and the discord caused by these impending COVID measures and restrictions. The first email states, the mandate is fracturing families and friends and fracturing the business relationships between small business in this wonderful place and their customers. Many do not comprehend the reasoning behind this mandate and more to the point, shall be unable to cope financially, emotionally or physically with the imposition of enforcing this unlawful mandate. Another resident writes, the impact on local businesses, small and large, is going to be catastrophic. They are also very unclear as to the legal implications if they retain unvaccinated workers or continue to serve unvaccinated customers. If they choose to follow the rules and sack employees, they risk not being able to run their businesses. If they turn away customers, they lose precious revenue. What choice are local businesses being given? Another quote, local small businesses cannot afford to turn away customers. They also can't afford to pay or fight large fines that the government want to impose. And lastly, We understand that these issues may not be able to be changed by our local council, but we feel it is important for the council to receive feedback from their local community members and know that there is a lot of anxiety, uncertainty and stress being put on local businesses. Your Worship, the Mackay region pulled together as one through the initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the lack of clarity and detail regarding these proposed COVID measures and restrictions slated to be imposed from December 17 is causing unrest within our community. The perceived enforced division of our community brought on by this mandate is causing significant concern regardless of a person's opinion on vaccination. Whilst the formation and enforcement of these measures is not the jurisdiction of local councils, to do nothing in the face of our community's growing fears is also not an option. So I thank you, Mayor, and my fellow councillors for listening to and advocating for the people of the Mackay region. Your Worship, this motion has my full support.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Are there other speakers? Councillor May, speaking for the motion.
Speaking for the motion. Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I appreciate the community coming in today to voice their opinion as well. We have been on a tremendous journey over the last 18 months since COVID came to our country. And it's been a learning curve for everybody, I think, in the community, that we have gathered information, we've analysed the data, we've taken into account the public health officials and their expertise in this matter. And we're nearly at I suppose I wouldn't say the end, but we're nearly at the point of where we can start to come back to whatever sort of normal life that we used to have living with the virus within our community. I absolutely respect the rights of people's choice. I do, on the other hand, advocate that people do become vaccinated if that's what their choice is. But I think it's something that everybody has a right to say whether they do or they don't. As a small business owner myself, I do feel the impacts of enforcing the current directive will be a great impost to small business, and not just in monetary terms, but in their employees and having to deal with customers on that day-to-day transaction of wanting to know whether you've been vaccinated, whether you can come into my business or you can't. That puts a whole lot of stress on small business owners who are already working way above 40 hours a week in their small business just to make a living. So I think that really needs to be taken into account. And then if I think about the council and its imposts, for a council the size of ours, the number of facilities and services that we provide across the community, the cost will be borne by the ratepayers. So it's a double whammy. We're paying through our small businesses and us as customers, and we'll be paying again as ratepayers, because whatever those regulations say that council has to impose upon our community, there'll be a cost involved in that as well. But I think at the very forefront of all of this is really about the health and safety of our community. And what I see at the moment is that the measures and the rhetoric that's being spoken about by the state government is causing divide and unrest in our community. And that's something that I, as a person and as a council, as a leader in this community, it doesn't sit well with me that those are the measures that we need to use in this community. So I would urge the state government to reconsider their decision around the laws on the 17th of December, provide that clarity so everybody knows where they stand. And the cost in all of this is not just monetary cost. It is the emotional toll that this has on people, has on our society as a whole, and I fully support your motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor May. Are there other speakers? No other speakers. Councillor Anglett, speaking for the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, I think both sides of the argument need to refocus their narrative on the entire issue. This is about the issues that may come as a result of mandates on people being allowed, where council will continue to support the narrative around people getting vaccinated. There's nothing wrong with that. We think it's the right thing to do, and we also, I think the majority of people believe that it's an individual's right to take up the offer or not. No one's going to be forcing anyone to do this, and if they ever try to, I'm sure the tone around the table will change. But the issue is the lack of information we actually have about what is going to happen. I think the motion focuses on the fact that we as a council are now writing to, basically demanding from the state government, what is it exactly that you want people in our community to do? When we have that information, we can then decide what is the correct thing as community leaders to do about it, so I support the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Engler. Other speakers? Councillor Mann.
Thank you.
Speaking for the motion.
Yes, I am. So while I support everyone's choice to have the vaccine, I fully support the state government in the rollout of the vaccine and feel that any claim that we're being administered a experimental drug is nonsense, and that's my opinion. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm proud to be fully vaccinated, and I'm not aware of any exemption that applies to government, especially local government. I also feel for businesses in our region and who will be impacted by the state mandate that needs to be addressed, as businesses will not be able to, in my opinion, administer that mandate that the government puts on them. When we talk about the cost to businesses in terms of dollars, there's also the impact mentally to everybody that will be expected to carry out or to enforce the mandates. And businesses, as they've already said, do not have that manpower. I fully support your motion in asking the state government where we stand and how we're going to go and what we're going to do going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mann. Are there other speakers? No other speakers. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. That now becomes a motion of council. Thank you very much, councillors. Okay. Let's move on to the consideration of committee reports and recommendations. Spit it out again. The Character and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting of October. It's been circulated in your agenda, councillors. Are there any questions about that? Do you have a question, councillor?
Thank you, Worship. I just note that in the minutes, Councillor Englert attended the meeting and was listed as a guest speaker. I just wanted to clarify, are any other councillors able to attend the advisory committee meeting in a guest capacity? And I have two other questions.
Who's the chair of that, Councillor Mann?
So absolutely, if there's relevance to what our terms of reference are, and that is heritage and history in our region.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you. The second one, Your Worship, is I also note on page 10, the Commonwealth Bank Council is going to be making contact with the new owner, which is great to see that we have a new owner, so we hopefully can move forward. And that was about a month ago. I was wondering whether or not
I don't
council
think there's a new owner of the Commonwealth
I
Bank.
thought that's what the minutes say. There's not a new owner at the moment. You're just referring to when there is a new owner.
There's no new owner of the Commonwealth Bank that we're aware of, Councillor Jones.
Okay.
Does that say that in the minutes?
I'll just.
It does.
It says that the owner of the Commonwealth building has recently passed away. Council will make contact with the new owner at an appropriate time to offer assistance.
Maybe that's just a inappropriate word.
Yes, yes.
It still belongs to the estate of the deceased.
Okay. So it's maybe in the future when there is a new owner. That's okay. I removed that question then, Your Worship. And I also wanted to just note that there were 3 resignations, and I'm just wanting to know, are we going to be filling those positions or are we going to let them lapse?
Councillor Mann.
We will be filling those positions next year. We didn't see there was any point to fill them this year because we're not having another meeting. And we will be actually doing a rotational basis so we don't have big gaps in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? No further questions? Somebody would like to move the reports of adoption? Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Green. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Your Worship. So another very full agenda for the last meeting of the year, and we did take the opportunity to host a morning tea for all our wonderful committee members for their valuable input through the year, so that was nice. We did acknowledge some committee members resigned. Carmel Kelly, who's no longer representing Pioneer Valley Museum, Don McCarthy, who has returned to Paris for his studies, and Debbie Brooker, who just felt that maybe she wasn't the right fit for the committee. I would like to acknowledge the valuable input from all those committee members that have now resigned, and especially to Carmel Kelly, who has spent a long time in our region supporting and promoting history and heritage. Pine Lighthouse was discussed again, and since the CHAC meeting, there has been another meeting held with internal officers and Chris Bonanno, who was a committee member. Former staff member Brian Osborne has been invited to every meeting and hasn't been able to attend, so we haven't been able to get his input. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be too much happening in that space, and we're aware that we are at risk of losing that building, so at some point we are going to have to do something, and I will liaise with Councillor Englert, who's expressed an interest in being part of that, to see how we can progress it. I have since been contacted by a community member and her husband expressing interest in being on that committee and also actively being involved in maintenance and promotion of Pine Island Lighthouse. And this particular lady has actually done a bit of research around it and a ship that was lost at sea close to that. We discussed local heritage awards, which will be held in 2022, and discussed some new categories that might be added, including to recognise the use of technology and acknowledging youth and heritage, which are both very valuable categories. I think that we can promote and certainly encourage people to be part of the awards. And finally, Councillor Englert did come and speak to us about his recent visit to Claremont Museum and some ideas that could be considered for heritage in our region.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Correspondence and officers' reports 11.1.1. The strategic financial report for the month of October. CEO.
Thank you. We'll be a quick report. So we've got an operating surplus of 1.6 million, which is consistent with last month as well. And the CapEx expenditure is also tracking per last month as well. So on track there as well. So.
Thank you. So all those run rates are very consistent month on month so far, but still early days, but that's good. Are there questions? No questions? Somebody like to move the reports on option? Councillor May moves, seconded by Councillor Englert. Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And as the CEO has just reported, the 1.6 positive variance towards our year-to-date budget is a good place to be. And then to date, the 33.3 million has been expended on council projects, which includes associated operational expenditure in the delivery of those projects, and that represents 26% of the total expenditure. I just draw councillors' attention to the areas of concern for noting, and as we've just had the discussion around COVID-19, still very much part of our considerations within council operations. And the work that's being undertaken in the asset data cleansing process and the implications that may have on council's finances going forward. And of course, the ever-increasing pressure on the supply of materials and resources, staffing resources that our organisation is currently feeling. And we don't really see anything sort of easing there in the near future. I did just this month want to highlight around our cash and our investment portfolio. We have about 80% of our total cash with the QTC, and we have around about $40 million in our term deposits, and that's been fairly consistent over over the period of time. I also wanted to draw councillors' attention to our rates receivables, and we have 83% of Mackay Regional Council's revised operating revenue budget is from our rate base, and the collection action is continuing with both of our external collection agencies and monitoring of our in-house payment schedules. And you can see from the table there that there is $10.4 million totally outstanding in our rates revenue, but a lot of that is in the current year. But if we just have a look at 2 years outstanding and 3 years outstanding, you'll see there's $917,000 in 3 years and 1.1 million in 2 years. I just really wanted to highlight that because it's something that we need to monitor, and I know that the staff do a great job in liaising with our ratepayers in promoting those payment schedules, and in worst case scenario when we need to go to our debt collection services. But if you have a look at the graph on the next page of the Category 5 councils and the average there of Category 5 councils, our debt recovery is well under what other Category 5 councils are. And of course our borrowings in this particular financial year. We've seen, if we look at the graph on page 29, and you'll see we started in October 20 with just under $130 million worth of borrowings, and we're currently sitting at $114 million worth of borrowings. And of course, our policy this year, and as it was last year, was no new borrowing. So we're continually paying off that debt, which is a good place for us to be as a council. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor May. Speaker against? Are there any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.1.2, Councillor report on the attendance of the Coast to Coast Conference. Councillor Jones, thank you very much for bringing this back to the council. This is an excellent report. Thank you. Are there questions at all?
I did have one.
You have a question, Councillor May?
Just in relation to, on the original report that went up to council for Councillor Jones to attend, there was two corporate plan linkages, one in coastal management and one in sustainability. But this report now only refers to the corporate plan linkage to coastal management, not to sustainability.
Oh, okay. So should that be a...
Well, the sustainability is all part of our corporate plan, Your Worship, so I've only ever referenced as the corporate plan because the corporate plan is our document and that's what refers to everything that we do in council. So
it was listed as two separate things.
Okay, it was listed. Okay. All right. We can address that later, but are there other questions? Other questions? Councillor Jones, you like to move? Somebody like to second? Councillor Green seconds. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I start by thanking councillors for giving me this opportunity to attend the 14th Coast to Coast National Conference. I've provided you all with a summary as well as my raw notes from the conference, but there are a couple of take-homes extra that I would like to share with you all. As noted in the agenda on page 36, under the corporate plan linkage, I believe that it states that the conference is linked under the corporate plan as coastal management, the management of beaches and coastal areas of the region in order to improve resilience against coastal erosion, increase biodiversity, improve amenity and access, and promote ecotourism. Your Worship, I was somewhat a little bemused to hear that the comments made by a councillor at the last meeting suggesting that I did not link the conference to our strategic objectives, when a cursory read would show that on page 36 of the corporate plan linkage was mentioned in the previous agenda. As councillors, we would be well aware that state and federal governments fund towards coastal adaptation, and on a local level, we are working on a coastal hazard adaptation strategy, and we have been for the last 3 years. There were not only coastal management practitioners and professionals attending the conference, but a large number of specialised people with degrees in a range of modalities. They not only backed up their science with evidence, but see a way forward for coastal adaptation in Australia, and that's exciting, Your Worship. Can I just say that there will be or should be a time that council will have to draw the line in the sand and make decisions about our foreshores and what they will look like, not only from a planning point of view, an environmental point of view, but an emotional and cultural point of view into the future for our future generations of Mackay. As you would all know, Queensland coastline from Gold Coast to Cairns is 1,757 kilometres. I'd like to pose some thought in all of your minds. Do we know which councils along the east coast of Queensland have the longest exposure in kilometres to the coast, and how many beaches do they have, and then consider how many are populated? Mackay Regional Council has 31 beaches and 24 of them are populated. Engaging with people that live in the 24 populated beaches will be the cornerstone of good planning. I present my report and encourage you all to read the Local Government Climate Change Adaptation Roles and Responsibilities. This document was put together in Victoria, but the first of its kind in Australia. This is a guide for local government decision makers such as ourselves and the ELT. I'd like to hand out a copy for everybody to read over the Christmas break, maybe, Your Worship, because I think it's very, very pertinent for something that our council can consider in the future. So, being that this could be relevant for us in Mackay, I'd like to see that we could lead the way in Queensland, and Your Worship, please accept my report for your consideration of this council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura speaking for.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I'd just like to thank Councillor Jones for the detailed report. As we've all read, it's very easy to see she must have taken quite a few notes during the during the event. Your Worship, two things are clear from this report. The first is the number of topics that were covered at the conference, and the second is that Councillor Jones has come back with many relevant points on how treating our coastline, that stretches from Ilby to Midge Point, should be undertaken. And now I look forward to some positive input from Councillor Jones can bring to the topics when we are discussing our coastline. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bonaventura. Any other speakers? Other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. 11.2, development services now. So let's do the development services monthly review report for October. Director.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Thank you for considering the Development Services Monthly Report for October. Some highlights for the month are as follows. Finishing touches were applied to the draft master plan and building concept for stage 1 of the Northern Beaches Community Hub. In October, Council was briefed on the building concept and master plan, and planning was undertaken for a combined community and agency reference group meeting held in early November. Council has submitted a funding application to complete a coastal hazard adaptation strategy for the Mackay region. Given Council was invited to apply for the funding, we believe we have a strong chance of being successful. In October, the Natural Environment Team focused its site maintenance efforts on Mayoral Reserve, Foreshore, McEwen's Beach, Sandfly Creek Environmental Reserve, Campoon Beach and Woodlands. Construction of a Parks and Environment Program green waste facility at Mackay has commenced. Earthworks to create a hardstand area are currently underway, and a fence and gate installation to complete the project have been programmed to follow. This will facilitate significant efficiencies in the operation of the Parks and Environment Program in this major growth corridor of Mackay. So that's why I'm very excited about this project and needed to mention it. Significant weed control work continued at the Botanic Gardens in October with the weed harvester and a long arm excavator combined with weed spraying continuing to have good results in keeping the weed cover down in the Botanic Gardens lagoons. Mackay Regional Council, in collaboration with Economic Development Australia, hosted the virtual 2021 National Economic Development Conference on the 13th to 15th of October. The conference attracted 227 delegates, and an in-person live streaming event was also held in Mackay for delegates from neighbouring regions. And finally, a Halloween event was hosted on site at the Serena Sugar Shed on 31st of October with special twilight tours, trick-or-treating and themed food and beverage offerings. The event drew a strong crowd and a good time was had by all. And with that, I would like to present this report to Council and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. Are there questions for the Director? Councillor Mann.
So I've got two. Page 82, Finchhaven Pump. It says the new Finchhaven waterfall pump is due to be installed. Just wondering what that was.
Director, can you answer that one?
I will have to take that one on notice. Your Worship, I'm not totally up to speed with the waterfall pump.
Right. And just one more in regard to weed management in general. So I know that we've said we've got clear water in the lagoon, which is really good. But I notice more and more seems to be creeping into the goose ponds, especially driving across the bridge every day. You see it. So I just wondered if we are looking at weed harvesting there.
Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if the weed harvester, I'm just thinking about the body of water, whether it would work as well in there. That's something I can follow up on and take on notice. Certainly we are looking at the weeds within the goose ponds and looking at a range of different treatment options for those weeds. So we are actively managing them, but it may not be appropriate to use weed harvester.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Bella.
In my eternal quest to find out whether we're winning or losing with these weeds, just could you pass a question to the Director regarding whether we're actually maintaining or whether we're waiting till we reach a trigger point before we then address that weed situation, or is it a combination of both?
Director, are you able to answer that?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Is this about the Botanic Gardens in particular, or the...
Well, Botanic Gardens specifically, but generally in our, and I know it's a huge job throughout the whole region, but just in our urban environment.
So what is the trigger point, really? Yeah.
So just through the Chair, through Your Worship, sorry, just to clarify, so the Parks and Environment Team, the Natural Environment Team manage weeds within our park assets. So broader weed management still sits in health and regulatory services. So I can only really speak to the weed work that we do within Parks Assets. So where we do have those aquatic weed issues, which is the botanic gardens primarily, and to a lesser extent now goose ponds, it's more of an active ongoing management. We're never going to totally eliminate weeds in those areas, and obviously with the botanic gardens lagoons we have a longer term strategy with the desilting project. It's just, even after that project's completed, it's going to have to be an ongoing regime of management that we'll need to keep the weeds at bay.
I think that's a very mature approach rather than a trigger point approach.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Jones, you've got a
Thank
question?
you, Your Worship. I just have three questions. One has already been covered off by Councillor Mann. I too was curious about the Finchapple waterfall. But on page 85, the economic development section mentioned the National Economic Development Conference. I was curious, being that conference was actually impacted by COVID, I'd like to know if there was actually a financial impact to council as a result, and if so, how much. The second question that I have, and in conjunction with the Mackay Isaac Tourism, we partnered with to produce a land-based fishing brochure. I was unaware of this, and it's to be completed in January. You know, as a new member of the Recreational Fishing Strategy Working Group, it may have been discussed previously with the previous group, but I'm just not sure, has it been on Connecting Mackay for public consultation? If we haven't, we potentially have the, we just may get it wrong if we don't consult, and I'd love to see a draft if that's possible.
Is this our document or is this?
It says in the minutes that it's a partnership between council and Mackay Isaac Tourism.
Who's producing it? Is the tourism body producing it? The tourism body's producing it. So it's not our document if the tourism body's producing
But
it.
if we're in partnership, wouldn't we have a say?
Not a say by our public consultation.
Okay.
We'll take the lead from the tourism body.
That's fine. If I can have a copy, that would be wonderful.
And so the other question was?
The other question was about the financial impact of the
Can you answer that, Director?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Worship. So with that one, we are still doing some of the final figures and reconciliation. I can provide the outcome of that once it's complete. I believe it will have an impact, just going virtual. It would have affected the attendance, and I'm not sure what effect it had on sponsorship, but like I said, once we've finished working through all that, we can provide councils with that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bonventura.
I just got an issue with the economic indicators graph on page 93. The numbers appear identical to the previous report in October, but all the dates have moved forward by 3 months. And now represents the June, as it now represents the June quarter. For example, December 19 employment figures were 58,906, and this has now been replaced as the September figures. So just could I ask the Director to advise me which data is correct on this?
Director.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to take this on notice. I'm sorry. Yes, haven't had a chance to investigate what's happened there, and it might just be a data input error.
That'd be good. Thank you very much for that.
Certainly looks a little bit like it. Any further questions? Councillor Seymour.
Just about the desilting trials at the lagoons there.
Yes.
It's got the further details of receiving a report has been caused by the contractor having resourcing issues. What are the resourcing issues like? Is it getting material to test or?
Staffing probably, yeah. It's Director.
Thank you, Worship. It's staffing. It's an issue of staffing.
It's just about endemic in the region at the moment. You can't get staff. Further questions? No further questions. Would somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor England moves, seconded by Councillor Jones. Councillor England.
Thank you, Worship. On the 8th of October, the General Manager of Tourism and Industry Development from the Queensland Government visited the Mackay region, was hosted by Mackay Isaac Tourism, but spent a considerable amount of time out at the trailhead at the Pioneer Valley, and I think that's a great conversation. It was good to get, these people are looking at infrastructure to fund, so I think that was a coup to get that individual here, and I think that they may be looking at some funding options for our Pioneer Valley mountain bike project. And on the 21st of October, Mackay Regional Council and Mackay Isaac Tourism held that workshop previously mentioned on the Barramundi Highway. Mackay and Isaac Regional Councils have both put in money. Mackay Isaac Tourism's the lead and has got a consultant along with some other funding to look at a collaboration between other regional centres along the coast which have access to Barramundi that might yield some additional visitation to all the regions. I think this is a great example of how a collaboration with our neighbouring councils can yield a potentially benefit for all at the same time. Our strategic planning have been busy. They've been working on those planning scheme amendments, the Finchatton Youngala Township master plans, Moroney Community Precinct plans, and the Northern Beaches Community Hub, the City and Waterfront, Riverside and Public Realm upgrades, the Sydney River and Sydney Street upgrades, and putting out the tenders, and activating Mackay City Centre. The fifth lane stuff that's been seen on social media has been really well received. It looks really great. And the natural environment mob have had the volunteers out collecting seeds from the Slave Point Reserve for future native plantings, and I think that's, Botanical Gardens, Your Worship. Waiting for the report, as Councillor Seymour mentioned, we're still waiting for the report into the desilting trial. The lagoon is looking much better as a result of the work that they've done with the long arm excavator and the weeds and the underwater algae, and I believe it is an issue around whether that weeding harvester can work in the shallower parts of our lagoon. But anyway, we'll wait and see. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Councillor Englert. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Jones speaking for.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. I too wanted to say thank you to Mackay Isaac Tourism for being part and instigating with the Barra Highway Visioning Workshop, which I attended. The workshop did allow the key stakeholders to have their say on how to position this unique and exciting project, and we discussed the opportunities and challenges. But from here, of course, we have the consultant, EarthCheck, that's going to develop a concept plan, and this is just another step in ensuring our fishing tourism in our region. I'd also like to just note page 73 and 74. I note that our development assessment and development engineering team are really under the pump. The development sector is booming and we have lots and lots of applications under assessments, and the lack of staff and availability in our organisation, as mentioned last week, is really slowing things up. But I hope that the general public and the developers understand that the crisis that we're in, and I ask for their patience while our staff do the best that they can do. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura speaking for.
Yes, Your Worship. Your Worship, as you know, I generally keep a close eye on the value of approved operational works as a guide to the current state of our regional economy. Last month, the value of approved works rose by 4.7 million, giving us a total of over 22 million for the calendar year. Now, that's well above the 2019 levels, but still below those dizzying heights of last year. And as we know, those numbers were pushed up by the government grants on home building grants. One other, if I may, and that is I'd like to mention the increased maintenance by staff on play equipment. The graph on page 80 shows an increase in visual inspections leading to increased minor and major repairs. This is good move as we're getting close to the school holiday season, and I'd like to ask the Director to pass on my thanks to staff that have been involved in that and keeping our playgrounds safe. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Bonaventura. Councillor Townsend speaking for.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I just wanted to give a little update on the Serena Sugar Shed because they can now boast that they are tracking well above their original budget, with revenue from their ticket and retail sales above their year-to-date forecasts. Continued growth is being experienced, with this October realising 510 visitors, which is 29.9% higher than October last year. And the cafe is also achieving a positive growth, with a focus on a refurbishment and a new expanded menu. Highlights for October also saw the Serena Sugar Shed becoming a foundation member of the newly formed Queensland Distillers Association, which aims to promote and advocate for distillers in Queensland. And another feather in their cap was being successful for winning gold awards for food tourism excellence and outstanding volunteer group at the 2021 Mackay Isaac Tourism Awards. So a great effort from a little bunch of very enthusiastic people out there. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Townsend. Are there other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion then. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to 11.2.2, and that's the Mackay floodplain and risk management study and plan. This is excellent work. I've got to say that it's great to see this come to the table in this agenda for this meeting, councillors. It is a good read. It's a great example of some tremendous work by our staff. So, Director, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and yeah, just to echo those comments, this is an amazing body of work. It's a real achievement, and it's a really great resource and strategic document to support Mackay Regional Council. It really puts us as an organisation at the forefront in terms of management of these hazards, and yeah, just the enormous amount of work by a number of people over a number of years to get to this point. It is really exciting to be here and to be presenting this to Council for adoption.
Yeah. Are there questions? Councillor Jones has a question.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I totally get that this study has taken a long time and a lot of work from our staff. The magnitude is huge. And I know that it went to peer review in 2019, and that was 3 years ago. And I understand that the updates have been added since. But once the updates, such as things like the ring road was added, I just wanted to ask, do our staff then run another model over it so that when that update is added with that new data, we can see whether or not there's any potential for further overland flows that will impact anything? So I was just curious. It's just taken so long to get there that as we've had to change things along the way, do we still go back and model those particular changes?
Director.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Now, I may need to come back to Council with a detailed technical answer, but I do know that over the years that this has been worked on, different inputs and changes have been factored in. So the model sits there as a basis, and it's about the inputs that inform that model. So certainly this represents what is our current knowledge and sort of our best available information that we have on the flood circumstances, I guess.
Councillor Simwell had a question.
Yeah, one thing I've got a question for is Bakers Creek and Walkerston, the flood levels there, but I thought previously they were always taken off the Pioneer River levels. Like every time you used to put an MCU on floodplains in Walkerston, it always used to relate back to the Pioneer River, not Bakers Creek. So has it changed, or have they always been Bakers
Yeah,
Creek?
well, it has, but you need to read the full plan, Director. Is there an easy explanation for that?
Again, it's probably a technical explanation, but as part of this, and you know, sometimes, you know, as part of this, there has been a review of where the flooding impacts come from, because the flooding impacts could be from even various locations and sort of combined to impact particular localities. So again, I would need to come back with the sort of technical response to that question, but yeah, this has been sort of a full review, and it is based on our best and data that we have currently.
So Councillor Simwell, from Robin Burkett's explanation to me, I mean, the 4 areas of review revealed a whole lot more data and a whole lot more basis now for actually flood planning into the future, rather than the individual reviews of the Pioneer River and Bakers Creek as a separate system. These have been reviewed, as I understand it, as an integrated system now, which has an impact. So, but we're happy to further that so that you get an understanding of it. Councillor Bella, did you have a question? Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? No other questions? Would somebody like to move then the adoption of the Mackay Floodplain Risk Management Study and Plan? Councillor England moves, Councillor Bella seconds. Councillor England.
Thank you, Worship. As said, an extensive body of work. As the technology improves over the years, the flood studies will change, and in this particular one, there are small changes that make some areas a little bit more concerning and some changes that make some areas a little bit less concerning. But the purpose is to mitigate flooding, to reduce future flood damages in the Mackay region. Mackay is the second lowest lying city in Queensland behind Hervey Bay, and we all know the history of the region. So this includes specifically the updates to the Pioneer River, Goose Ponds, Mackay City being Sandfly and Shulgate Creeks, and Bakers Creek, and these will update and replace some of the other existing studies. And the key findings demonstrate that we need to be consistent in updating as technology avails itself to us, to taking advantage of that and being consistent in future studies, so that we can ensure that we're doing the best by our communities. But as said by everyone, an excellent body of work, very comprehensive, and it takes a long time to sink in sometimes.
Thanks, Councillor Lingo. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bell speaking for.
I'd just like to basically echo your comment, Your Worship, regarding what a great body of work and how important it is. Initially, I think a lot of people were scared, worried about this when they became aware that it was happening, you know, with a view towards insurance and that sort of thing. But you can't be too prepared. And considering, as Councillor England said, where we sit, elevation-wise, we're in continual risk of flooding, which we saw a couple of years ago post-Cyclone Debbie, and I think it was in 2008, where we had another big incident. The beauty of this are the risk management measures that are recommended and some of the mitigation options that we have here. Things that, as Councillor Jones alluded to, there are changes occurring in our region that may very well affect the amount of flooding we get in certain areas and the way it behaves. And just referring back to what your grandfather told you is not always the way to plan to the future. You know, some of these annual exceedance probabilities are, you know, 1 in 100 years. So we need to be current. We need to look at what are we going to do. Populations change and where they are changes. So we've got to have a plan there. And I think that something like this is of tremendous value. Because to be perfectly honest, we're in the middle of it down in Kamala, and really there wasn't a plan. It happened, it wasn't expected. It happened a heck of a lot more quickly than people thought. And people just had to make do as best they can. Something like this enhances our response.
Thanks, Councillor Bella. Any other speakers? Councillor Jones speaking for.
Thank you, Worship. I also want to, like I just said, the work was huge, and the workload that our staff has been through is amazing. I do want to just make the point though, how can we do better? I am concerned, Your Worship, that we are missing the mark as far as you know, consultation goes. And I know I've talked about this on a number of occasions over the last almost 2 years in my term, about connecting Mackay. I just don't think we're hitting the mark. And in this project alone, I want everybody to think about how many households are actually in these catchments. There's a huge amount of households. We have consulted for 2 months using media releases and a couple of drop-in sessions, which we as council know are not always, you know, well attended, because the community say they don't know it's on. Connecting Mackay actually had 104 downloads and only 2 submissions. So if we had 104 people interested in it, but then only 2 made submissions, how many more if we had potentially sent an email out to all? It doesn't have to be a letter in the mail, it could be an email. If people, our ratepayers, have you know, email addresses, and they can be approached and say would you like to be, you know, consulted via this method if there's something concerning your area. I see that we actually sent an email to industry, and industry wouldn't be as many as the houses in that area, but we did that. So I just wanted to know whether or not that that point for improvement could be considered next year. I know that we're, you know, closing down for Christmas, and it just may be an opportunity to be able to open up a more enormous amount of consultation capacity with our community. Thank you.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Bonaventura.
Look, yeah, I will. I'll just make a couple of points purely for residents that may be listening in relation to some of the key findings of the flood study. And one is that the Piney River discharges are consistently lower than the previous estimates, except for the 0.2% exceedance probability. Flood levels in Shalgate Creek and Sandfly Creek catchment area are similar to previous studies. Flood levels in Bakers Creek are mostly higher in the Walkerston area. Key findings also show the dominant source of flooding in East Mackay and South Mackay area are from storm tide instead of Piney River overflow. And it is no surprise, Your Worship, that parts of the Cremorne are potentially vulnerable to structural damage from a 1% AEP event. Look, the plan has also investigated structural flood mitigation options to reduce the number of properties affected by above floor flooding, and that will come at a cost. But look, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. It's been a great plan.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Are there other speakers? No other speakers. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to the ECI reports for the month of October. And the first one is Transport and Drainage Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. So firstly, no LTI, so pleasing to see only 3 incidents for the month. Just on the budget perspective, there's a couple of areas that are behind current year-to-date forecast. So that's the RMPC contract with DPMR and our drainage and maintenance and sweeping activities. So just looking at opportunities that we are to pull those back using contractors. Largely, the last 2 is drainage maintenance, sweeping activities around just our internal resources. So just for that recruitment process where we have to get staff on board. I've been doing a lot of work on unsealed road maintenance, but I focused there on using our Works of Queensland funding. So I spent over $1 million in relation to that for the current year to date. Just completed our inspections level 1 and 2 for our bridge, and as a result there are some maintenance activities that will come out of that. So just looking at how we actually prioritise those and review those going forward. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Director. Questions for the Director? Councillor Bonaventura.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, on page 104, under the drainage and maintenance activities graph, bus shelters is the 4th most common maintenance activity. And I was just asking the Director, if you could please tell me how many bus stops we maintain, and does this maintenance include mowing? And if it does include mowing, part of the works, can you tell me what the intervention level is for mowing at bus stops, please?
So you got all that, Director?
I have, Your Worship. Love my stats. Bus stops, so over 400, so lots of bus stops. Shelters are roughly about 300, so obviously not all that bus stops have shelters. So currently the maintenance program's on roughly on a 3-month cycle in relation to mowing around those, but there are some intervention levels where it's got to be greater than 300 millimetres in grass height which we get around that.
It answers the question, but it leaves me with more questions, which I will take up at a later date, Your Worship.
We
Thank
won't
you.
go into the grass height at the moment. Thanks, Councillor Bonaventura. Okay, so Councillor Bella.
Page, hard copy 104, 3.1, road and drainage maintenance activities. Just a couple of questions. On the graph there, completed maintenance activities, collection and removal, ... maintenance of ... signage installation and collection of illegal. Can I just have those finished?
Yeah, they've been truncated, the labels.
It's not important, just
maybe expanded graph around.
Yeah, through Your Worship, happy to.
Oh no, just
so for future monthly reports, we obviously have the full details there for the benefit of councillors.
Do you know what they are?
No, I'd have to take which one. Sorry.
Well, it's collection and removals, which is about just over halfway from the left to the right. And there's a few dots. There's signage installation and what follows that. And bus shelter general something. Collections of illegal.
That's the one that I'm particularly interested in.
Shopping trolleys, isn't it?
I think it's probably better I take it on notice. Yes, I'd probably get a percentage right. But...
Thank you. All right. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. With all that banter now, I've forgotten where I was. I just wanted to ask a question. What does the acronym AVRG and ADAC stand for?
Director. Take that one on notice.
Oh, page 106, my apologies.
through your worship. So, sorry, council, was it AVRG? So they're just the working groups that we basically have for the different areas. So for road, water and sewage and park. So
ADAC?
yeah, I think it's, again, I can come back with
Okay, all right. And just one other mention. I'm just not sure how far back I would have to find this info, and I don't know the answer to it at this point in time, but I thought I'd just ask. It came to my attention that, you know, we're doing this huge asset management project around doing data cleansing, and I just thought, are we doing data cleansing just in your directorate, or are we doing it across the board, like organisational services everywhere?
That's more for the CEO, but...
Is it?
We're doing it across asset categories, so eventually we want all our assets listed with condition monitoring and everything. We're cleaning up all of our assets databases, so we can't tackle them all at once, so there's a sequencing of.
Thank you.
We had, I don't know whether you were here, Councillor, but we did have a briefing on all that just recently.
Okay, I may not have. Thank you, Worship.
Okay. Further questions? No further questions? Would somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Mann moves, seconded by Councillor Green. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I'd like to echo the Director's comments around safety. Fantastic to see that safety is a priority with no LTIs and minimal incidents. And when you consider the area of council with heavy machinery and nature of work completed by staff, that's a fantastic result. So I would ask the Director to pass that on to staff. The Director noted that vacancies are impacting areas of council, and transport and drainage is no exception. But it's really good to see that extra resources have been engaged to clear the backlog of work, especially around footpaths, because they are high risk areas, and we want public safety in all cases. With the bond predicting higher than average rainfall though for the coming storm season, I'm just wondering if we can get some more resources to the open drain maintenance, because I know that our residents will be looking for that in the lead up to storm season. The Director touched on the unsealed road maintenance, so that's over $1 million. That's an amazing amount of money already expended. And I just want to touch on asset management and the enormous amount of work that's going into either data cleansing or rollout of maintenance.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Mann, speaker against? Any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. The ECR report for waste services for October.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So again, no LTIs. Just to know, we did have another, obviously, waste truck that's had a fire issue yesterday, so I think that's 3 for the year. So obviously still early, and we'll have to investigate that. But out in the Mackay area, and had to dump a load. So something we obviously continue to need to look at. Just in relation to some of the data from the report, so over 383,000 collections for the month, and from there, only 39 bins were missed. You will see we've had a significant number of increase in replacements over the last few months, so 427. So obviously, we're very proactive in looking at the bins and the issues that it has, but great to see that level of service and being able to get out there and replace them very quickly. Code and pockets tonnages are down again, so we're still seeing that trend sort of up and down month to month with no really clear sort of trend lines coming through. In relation to materials recovery facilities, so the tonnage is reduced slightly, but I do know that there has been a slight increase in the contamination rates. Again, that's a little bit hard for us to determine where that's coming from, given that we have multiple changes coming from a number of our neighbouring councils. Interestingly, we've now issued out over 150,000 vouchers in the current period, so that's a significant number. Currently, it's still early in the period, but the trend rate's a little bit up on where it has been previously. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Director. So that incredible 236 tonnes sold in the month at the incredible tip shop. So seems to be a lot of stuff moved. Questions? Councillor England.
I saw the result of having to dump the waste onto whatever the nearest open space was. We don't have to have the answer here, but I'm curious about like
obviously the fireys are called, and so do we then we send officers out once the fireys are finished to go through the mess and find out what it was, remove it, and then we get another team in to come with a truck and put it back on. And
so yeah, there obviously it's an investigation director. You. So
through your worship. So it's combined. Obviously, we work with JJ Richards in relation to that. So we'll go back and have a look at the material that's been dumped and see if there's an ignition source there that we can identify. And then we'll obviously go back through data from the cameras to actually see if we can identify from what particular property that may have come from. And then obviously there's the added cost there that we've got to obviously get another truck out there, collect that material, and obviously take it to
I follow up with this. Have we ever had a fire in the main pit as a result of something that's ever?
Director.
Yes, we've had some issues before. It's probably a little while ago, but we have had some fires in that pit. It creates a significant risk for us. Obviously, that takes probably 85% of our tonnage is through. So any time that's sort of out for a period of time, it creates some risk. So yeah, that's another education piece. And normally, obviously, we have whoever's operating that has people there, that sort of thing, or we go through the resource centre at the front end to obviously get the material out and may cause an issue.
Thanks, Director. Further questions for the Director? No further questions. Would somebody like to move the reports of adoption? Councillor Hassan moves, seconded by Councillor Bonmangira. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, Worship. It's always pleasing in these reports to read that there's no lost time injuries, particularly for such a high risk area of council such as waste services, which there was no LTIs or incidents reported for October. So I think it's just a really good reflection of our staff and the contractors' attention to safety in this area, that they consistently achieve such high results. I wanted to focus this month, the Director mentioned in his report about the Lawmac Committee, and I'm Council's representative on that committee and attended the quarterly meeting last week in the Whitsundays. Lawmac was formed in 1993, quite a long time ago, to advocate the need for a regional approach to waste management and resource recovery. It's now comprised of 21 full member councils, 8 corresponding member councils, 3 honorary members, 40 corporate members and 1 individual member. So quite a large organisation based around regional Queensland. Lawmac was previously operating under the auspice of the former Northern Alliance of Councils, which has now become the Regional Queensland Council of Mayors, and due to those changes, there was some discussion about Lawmac becoming an organisation in its own right. So at that meeting last week, we held the inaugural meeting to become a standalone organisation. This is a really exciting time for Lawmac, having existed for such a long time under the umbrella of another organisation, to now be branching out on our own offers us huge opportunities for growth and for further development. And I just really look forward to being a part of that. I was elected as Treasurer for that organisation last week, somehow always end up as the Treasurer. And going forward, the organisation will now be known as the Local Authority Waste Management Action Committee. So we're going to be doing a lot more work in being out there and visible to all levels of government. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Mackay Regional Council's Waste Services Manager, Jason Grandcourt, for the huge amount of time and the hard work that he puts into the operations of Lawmac. So through your worship, I'd like to ask the Director to pass on Lawmac's sincere thanks to Jason for his work as Lawmac's Technical Officer during this time. That's a role that Jason undertakes in addition to his role here at Mackay Regional Council, and he contributes many hours in excess of his normal paid work. And then finally, just as a matter of interest, there were many presentations at the workshop on Thursday at Lawmac, and one of those was from the Battery Stewardship Council. It was a very interesting presentation that highlighted it's an area that Australia is sadly falling behind in comparison to other countries. The World Bank 2020 Minerals for Climate Action report predicts that battery metal demand will jump by 500% by 2050. The growth required means that even if recycling rates were to reach 100% today, there'd still not be enough copper, aluminium and other trace metals to meet that demand. So we've got some real work to do, and we've just heard from the Director about fires in trucks. A lot of times those are caused by batteries in our landfill and in those recycling and general waste trucks. As also those batteries being taken to landfill is a huge issue for council. So it's just another chance for us to come on board with an opportunity to recycle and reuse those products that would normally go to landfill.
Thanks. Councillor Hassan, speaker against. Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura speaking for.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of points. Firstly, I note the amount of bin repairs at 129 and bin replacements at 427. I think the increase in bin replacements is most likely due to the improved awareness by residents that council service is to replace bins free of charge. Unfortunately, this has created a temporary shortage of new bins, so I ask residents to be a little bit patient if they haven't got theirs just yet. The other point there, the increase of numbers of new service requests of 63, again is reflective of our improving housing market and is very good to see. The other point I'd like to raise is that the lower waste tonnes at Hogan's Pocket, coming in at 7,500 tonnes, as the director said, is amongst the lowest we've had all year. There's only a couple others through the year that have sort of gone around the same. And I think it's just a positive sign that the community is getting that picture of, reduce and reuse. But finally, the Mirth education tours were provided to 5 schools covering 300 students. And this education forms a valuable start in training the next generation on reducing waste to landfill moving forward. The reason I say that is my kindy-aged grandson was one of the students at one of those schools. And he's come home with an absolutely new understanding of keeping an eye on whether there's a triangle under every bit of rubbish that he picks up. So I think it's a positive, and I look forward to the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Councillor Green, speaking for.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I too can say how our kindy kids have really taken that on board, and I get in trouble if I don't wash out a container. Look, I just wanted to echo the sentiments that Councillor Hassan has made in regards to the New Look Law Mac and particularly Jason Graincourt's contribution. But Councillor Hassan herself, very humble, I think, in this area, but I accompanied her as the proxy for our Law Mac committee to the Proserpine workshop on last Thursday, and I had a number of conversations with some long-standing members of Law Mac who absolutely were blown away by the contribution that Councillor Hassan has given so far and what her enormous contribution will be going forward as Treasurer for the New Look Law Mac committee, and they were very, very impressed with her depth of knowledge and experience and what she could actually bring to the committee. So congratulations on your appointment as Treasurer, Councillor Hassan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. ECI Water.
Thank
Director.
You. Pleasing to see with safety again, no incidents recorded, so it's very good. The water team has had a really good couple of years and continues to have a strong focus in relation to safety, so it's really pleasing to see. You will know we've had a jump up in our water consumption, so obviously that's something we continue to have a look at, and obviously it's linked to the higher weather that we've had. Even though we've had some more recent rainfall in November, we'll probably see a drop, but we do correlate that directly to the warmer weather coming in and the outdoor usage. So just a reminder, even though our water storage is all in strong positions, that obviously still people should obviously water at the right times and use their water as efficiently as they possibly can. Just picking up on the previous notes around education sessions, we've obviously reinstigated those in relation to our water education program. So really pleasing to see that we got to 630 students across the month. So that's again something off the back of COVID that we put on hold for a fair period of time. Also interesting to note, so we had around 48 estimates quotes going out. So we've seen a continued trend for the last 3 or 4 months there. So, but in noting that our plumbing inspections are down, so it's a little bit obviously reflective of the strong building market at the moment. So other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Director. Questions for the Director? Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just a couple of questions in regards to Middle Creek Dam. Is the mill still taking water from Middle Creek Dam for their operations, or do we do periodic releases from the dam in regards to the capacity of the water there?
Yeah, through Your Worship. So so effectively, if there isn't any water available at Plain Creek Mill, in the weir there, the they'll make contact with us and we'll release water down to ensure it's got sufficient water for them to continue to take. So obviously we don't have a water treatment plant attached to that water source anymore, so it's something we continue to have a review of, looking at what options may exist for us, and we'll probably come back early in New Year as council to talk about what they may be.
Right, thank you.
Just one more in regards to the water supply to Serena, but in particular the Alligator Creek area. Does our water still go through the sand filters at the Alligator Creek area there, or is that bypassed now with the pipeline?
Director.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, again. I'll take that on notice, council, just to understand. So my understanding is that primarily it's probably bypassed most of the time, and we supply directly from the Mayoral water treatment plant, but I'll just check that and make sure it's actually accurate.
Other questions? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just the graph on page 139, works completed by asset type. There's a huge replacement of our AMRs, around about 544. Just a bit of background from the director as to why they're being replaced at this stage, or is it just normal? Thank you.
Stanley, Director.
Yeah, through your worship, there's probably a couple of key reasons. So one is there's probably a number of AMR devices getting into their residual life, so needing to be replaced. So as you'd be aware, we're sort of an early instigator in relation to those devices. So now the AMR devices are built into a fully integrated meter, so as we go forward, the expected battery life will be longer. So there's a bulk of those to catch up, and there's also probably been a backlog that we haven't been able to get to. So we've actually engaged some external contractors to try and speediate some of those replacement programs that we weren't really getting to them as quickly as we wanted to.
Just leads to a quick follow-up question. So with the earlier types which had the separate battery pack and reader on the outside, are we just replacing the battery pack and reader, or are we putting in whole new meters?
Again, through your worship. So good question. So where we are doing a meter replacement, we're going for a fully integrated meter. Where we have an issue with the AMR device, but the meter is not past its end of its residual life, we're just replacing the AMR device directly.
Yeah, thank you, Worship.
Councillor Seymour.
With the, as far as the league notifications, are they a carry on every month, or are they new leagues? Like this month there was 5,000 league notifications.
Oh, you mean, is it a cumulative report, or is it 2 months?
Through your worship, it's a bit of both. So there can be circumstances where leaks continue on for a number of months. There can be, or it may represent that a leak started and finished within that particular month.
So the 5,000 that are reported here, that's the ones we've been dealing with for this month?
Yeah, through your worship, so it would be a combination. So if people still have a leak and they haven't fixed it, and we've given multiple notifications, we continue to obviously give them multiple notifications. So if they've got a leak and they're not fixing that, if a new leak starts, obviously that's a new notification. So if you're signed up to my H2O portal and you've got a leak that you're not fixing, you'll continue to get notifications around that. And if the leak increases, you'll also get notifications around that.
Okay. No further questions? Somebody like to move the Water Services Monthly Report be adopted? Moved by, hello? Councillor Hassan. Second by Councillor Jones. Councillor Hassan.
Nothing prepared, but again in this one, the report that there's no LTIs or injuries and incidents for this month, which is a great reflection on the staff and contractors' commitment to that area. Just one point for the director, I was recently in Brisbane, and I've got to say the quality of our water is far superior to theirs in case of So again, we're very fortunate to have the second best water in the world, and I'm sure we're going to get to the absolute best water in the world. And also just a reminder again to the general community, those leak notifications, 5,500 per month is a pretty phenomenal number. So just be aware of the amount of water that's wasting, and remind people to respond to the notifications, but also look up my H2O and get connected if you're not, so that you are getting those notifications quicker.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Hassan. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just one quick point, Worship, just in relation to the water usage that has sort of seen a bit of a spike, and I agree with the director. While we do have reasonable stocks of water supply, it's more about to residents to say, just be a bit careful where you can, because, you know, come next May when we send the bill, you'll be a bit of a shock at what it is. So just try and be a bit mindful. You know, when you've got numbers like 327 litres per person per day in the Morani area, that is getting quite up high. In fact, that's higher than what it was in November last year, because the graph's only around 300, so we're well above where we need to be. So I just ask residents to be mindful of that. Hey?
Thanks very much, Councillor Bonventura. No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Organisational Services Review Report for October 2021. Acting Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of Director Colin Lamb, who's away on well-earned leave, I'm very happy to present the report to you. It shows the incredible scope of work that happens in the Organisational Services Department, and also the very high workloads that are being experienced in the area. Just a couple of highlights that I'd like to point out from the report. The information services team reported a 99% satisfaction rating, so that's pretty significant given that any of us that have had computer issues, a 99% satisfaction rate with the advice that we've been given is actually pretty good. So I'd like to congratulate the team on such excellent customer service. In response to our staff engagement we did earlier on, one of the things that ELT did was to introduce training for our management and our coordinators. That's called Elevate. You may see that referenced in the report. So that's been rolled out to all of our management team and all of our coordinators. We're coming to the end of that. It's a very comprehensive training program going over several days for each participant, and it's been very well received by all of the managers and coordinators that have participated in that. I'm also very pleased to advise that we're now up to date with all of our emergency response plans across council. So all of our facilities have up-to-date emergency response plans, and our emergency control organisations are all fully equipped with training and membership. I'd also like to point out that very high attendances at the mark in the month, 9,379, which is very high, and we expect the numbers to increase as the summer months continue. And finally, I'd just like to mention that there's a lot of good stuff happening behind the scenes. A lot of the business improvement projects that we don't see that are very apparent. The work to review our risk framework, the work to review our corporate planning framework, our long-term financial forecasting project, the review of our business process mapping. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening behind the scenes that is progressing very well. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Acting Director. Questions? Councillor Mann.
So I've got a few. On electronic page 159, we see increased call volumes and 60% increase in processing, but there is a note in the overview of external customer service at 5.1 that says it's challenging to meet service levels without increased staffing levels. So my question is, are our staffing levels right? I've been asking about this for over 12 months now.
Director, can you?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm assured that all of our vacancies are being actively managed in the sense that there is recruitment action underway for all of our vacancies. We have had some recruitment difficulties, which is quite common across council and also across the broader community. In the meantime, some of the interim measures that we've put in place is to use labour hire. So we've actually contracted labour hire to help fill some of those vacancies whilst we recruitment. And also, where possible, we've extended the hours of part-time staff. Nevertheless, the workloads are increasing, and I think, as discussed earlier on in the meeting, some of those factors are the economic development in the area, that we're seeing a surge in the number of inquiries, we're seeing a surge in the number of housing sales and that sort of thing, which is putting pressure on staff, but they are coping reasonably well. In terms of the staffing situation at the moment, I'm very pleased to report that the customer service team now has a full complement of staff, and that we've just finished recruiting 3 new staff to the development support team, which is one of the areas that has been under pressure. Those 3 staff will start in January. And also, whilst some of our KPIs have not met our targets, it's interesting. It's important to note that our overall customer satisfaction is still at a very high 96%.
Thank you very much.
So,
Councillor Mann.
yeah. So in terms of the KPIs, do they need to be reviewed given we've got the same amount of staff as 5 years ago, but a 60% increase in processing? And when will this happen? Is it possible to have a briefing on that?
Director.
I'll have to take that on notice and get back to you.
Thank you.
And two more. Page 177, certified agreement arbitration process is progressing with the first hearing to occur in mid-November. Is there an update on that?
Yes, so we had a directions hearing yesterday, and that directions hearing basically scheduled or confirmed the hearing dates in January, and in relation to the arbitration in January, we've been advised that be prepared that it's one agreement versus two, but potentially or any other outstanding issues as well. So we're collating all of those issues at the moment for that hearing in January.
And the final one, page 178, staff Christmas party. There will not be a central function for all staff due to COVID-19 restrictions, and I wondered what those restrictions are.
Well, they haven't changed from the last directive, but...
No, so the decision was made a fair while ago now where it was unclear whether there'd be lockdowns or not. While at the time we'd like to have one big Christmas party, it was decided we didn't want to go ahead with that and potentially face some lockdowns. So we arrived at the decision that this year we would do separate with a view to one big Christmas party next year.
Okay. Councillor Bella.
Page 157, all services, business improvement project initiatives. SMS reminder rates notices. This is quite interesting to me, but we issued reminders, I think it's a good job, issued reminders to nearly 6,000 people, and we got 1,280 payments received from those reminders. First thing I'd like to say is 5,718. That's a 10% of our rates and rateable entities. What I'm trying to understand, if you take the 1,280 from the 5,718, we're left with 4,438. Those other figures there don't kind of encapsulate what happens with all of those. And if it can't be answered straight away, I understand, but I would like to see a breakdown in roughly how long it takes to catch up that 4,438 and at what trigger points as such that, you know, someone either pays or proceeds down the line.
The rates of recovery continuing.
So I'm happy to provide that out of session. There is a very detailed process that involves all of the various stages, which includes ultimately sending it off to the collection agency.
Yeah.
We'll circulate that.
But I'd just like to see at what point do people say, well, yeah, I've got to pay it now, and away we go. Interesting as well would be to see how many people are, whether we have that data, repeat offenders in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Acting Director. Further questions? Councillor Jones has a question.
Thank you, Worship. I have three actually. The first one, page 164, a little bit about our staff contingent. You know, over 1,000 vacant positions, 150, and on page 166 talks about the resignations, people that have left even without notice. There were 16 of those for the month. So I was just curious. I think I've sort of got half of the question answered by listening to everybody else's questions. But how many people did we actually employ for the month, and then were we going backwards? I'm thinking possibly not if we're using labour hire to fill the gaps. So that's one question.
So I don't have that detail before me, but I can obviously get that and provide that out of session.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second question, Your Worship, is to do with page 171, aquatics facility. It's really great to see that the Memorial Pool's open again, and there's over 1,000 regulars that get a chance to be back at their favourite pool. However, I've done a little bit of research, and what's become alarmingly obvious to me is the lack of signage that indicates where the Memorial Pool is. Firstly, as a memorial, we should obviously respect that it's a place of remembrance and of our fallen. And I would think that Main Roads would have this on their signage plan as a place of significance, as it is a heritage listed building. Further in my investigation, also note that if you Google Mackay, which I have a copy of it here, and you click on the map on the right, it lists that the Blue Water Lagoon at the time that I clicked this was closed, and that's fine. But it doesn't show on that map where the actual memorial pool is, or that it was currently open.
This is not a chance for making statements.
No, I've got a question. I just need to give some...
Make the question, Councillor Jones,
Well,
please.
I need to give you the background before I say what I want to say. I basically want to ask council to investigate with Main Roads as to why it's not recognised on their signage, and you know, even to the extent, Your Worship, that right at the actual memorial pool, there's signage there that gives directions to Blue Water Lagoon and Art Space, but it doesn't say that it's right on that corner that the memorial pool is right there. So I'm asking if that can be done. We can liaise with them. I'm also asking if, as a heritage listed building, can we actually have it added to the Heritage Walk for council?
Yes, we've done that. You've got to put your questions to this particular report here. So what is the question for this particular report that we can deal with?
I'd like an audit done.
Of what?
Of the signage, and I'd like it compared, digital as well. I'd like it compared to other pools, because I just don't think that the memorial pool is getting you know, the signage and recognition that it needs. How else can we increase the patronage? Otherwise, we're setting it up for failure.
Okay, Director, we might just do a tabletop on.
Yes, certainly. I'll see what can be done, and we'll circulate it again out of our session.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. All right.
Oh, my last question, sorry, was page 174, the HVAC. It says that they're still underway, 60% completed Paget, 80% of Wellington Street. So do we know when this is going to be completed?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have that detail, but I'm aware that they have come across a few problems along the way. There were things that had not been foreseen as part of the original planning of that project, which is delayed it somewhat. But I can get back to the council with the projected date of completion.
Thank you.
Further questions? No further questions? Somebody would like to move the report's adoption. Councillor Mann moves the report's adoption. Councillor May seconds. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Worship. Firstly, a big thank you to all staff for their focus on safety. No LTIs and minimal incidents is fantastic, but it is concerning to see that a child was found in a flotation device submersed underwater after being flipped by a sibling. And I think it's just a reminder to parents and carers to make sure that they are watching out for those sorts of incidents. In terms of business improvements, I think it is fantastic to see SMS reminders and rates notices did have good results. Certainly an improvement on what we used to do before, and the SMS messages seem to be prompting people as well. And it might just be that residents have forgotten and they do need that quick reminder. I'd like to acknowledge our staff who deliver our frontline services too to such a high standard every day. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I just wanted to mention some stats. So 8,063 calls were received in October, which is an increase of 2,000 calls since the same time last year. 7,155 emails, increase of 2,315 on the same time last year. Development services within shared services received high inquiry numbers, 273 building approvals lodged by private certifiers, 213 development plumbing applications, and 133 planning advice inquiries. So that's huge as well for a small team. I wanted to mention property services. They don't always get a mention, and the enormous amount of work they do in the lease and property matters. They also handle an enormous amount of requests for service on our own council-owned properties. And I think it's safe to say that the matters they deal with are highly emotive sometimes and quite complex. So I'd just like to acknowledge them for the amount of work they do.
Thanks, Councillor Mann. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Jones speaking for?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Page 170, I note that our new mobile library van is actually starting to take shape, which is great, and I'm sure the community who live in our outreach areas is certainly going to be appreciative of the new van that you know, will help them keep connected into the future. The other thing I wanted to mention, Your Worship, IT support, and the Acting Director has already mentioned a small component of that, but I just want to note that they have absolutely excelled. I note that in their KPIs in all areas, not just one, all areas have been above average, and I'd like to ask the Acting Director to pass on my thanks to the work that they do in keeping the Mackay Regional Council as a business not only up to date with IT in our world, but their service in keeping our organisation safe from cyber attacks. Thank you, Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Speaker
Four.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Just 2 points. One is I was really impressed with the great numbers using both the Morani pool at 4,888 and the Serena pool at over 5,500. It's really good to see our regional pools getting used. But today I'd just like to thank the Director for the new graph on page 160. This graph breaks down our calls by 15-minute intervals. And when you look at the time frame between about 9:15 and 9:45, we hit 29 calls on average, or the peak time of 29 calls. And that really, to me, is the greatest graph I've seen in a long time to explain why we end up with such call wait times. So if you try to ring in those times, you've got 29 calls in 15 minutes. It would be very difficult, no matter how many staff you had on, to answer those calls in a reasonable period. So yes, the maximum is 29, but in the period there are 8 above 20 in 15-minute intervals. And I think yes, I get a lot better understanding for the staff there and how much effort they will put in during those peak times. So to the Director, thank you for the new graph. It's very good, and I look keen at following up how we go in the future with that area.
Thanks, Councillor Bonaventura. Other speakers. Councillor Green speaking for.
Speaking for, just one point, thank you. The People and Culture team was invited to participate in a training session with the Sporting Willies Mackay Machines team. I think this is so important, whether it's the opportunity to take a walk on country with our First Peoples or to take a spin in a wheelchair around a basketball court. It's so important for us as an organisation to really have an immersive insight in how we can better support employees in our organisation and also be attractive to other would-be employees, and which it helps to make us the employer of choice in the Mackay region. And I think this is really well done, and I hope it sounds like they had a really fun time. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Green. Are there any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thank you. Let's move on. 11.4.2, the adoption of council policies. So there's 3 policies: 53, the waste collection services; 73, the provision of road infrastructure to education establishments; and 44, the accessible communities policy, and 1 policy for recession, and that's the cultural diversity policy. Are there questions? No questions? Would somebody like to move the adoption? Councillor Jones moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Worship. Look, the establishment of these policies is very timely. We need to be doing better in relation to reducing landfill all the time, and I thank the staff for the policy number 053. In relation to the new policy 073, the provision of road infrastructure to establish educational establishments, I applaud the Council for implementing this policy, as I've been working with Eton State School to start a project to create a safe space to drop off and pick up of their students for some time now. And I know that there are other councillors in the area that also are looking at potentially schools that would like to see this policy. In relation to number 44, can I just say the most important message out of this policy for me is on 5.1, the first dot point stating we must value all people in our community. And on page 200 it states that there will be education for all Mackay Regional Council staff and councillors about cross-cultural issues through internal training programs, and I look forward to that training, as I'm sure all councillors will. Thank you, Worship.
Speaker against? Any other speakers? So for the 3 policies and 1 recession policy, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.4.3 is the application for conversion to freehold over part of a lot 491 on the registered plan 271107. So we've had briefings on this, councillors. Any questions? No questions? Would somebody like to move the adoption then? Councillor Green moves, seconded by Councillor Anglet. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a straightforward application. However, I'd like the opportunity to say a few words here. And so this report is asking Council to consider a request from Mackay Sporting Club Limited for Council to support the revocation of 1,246 square metres of reserve land, of which they already lease, to freehold land to be acquired by the club. This land is situated just south of the existing club, and the conversion of reserve to freehold land is proposed to then be amalgamated into their existing parcel of freehold land. This will enable the club to expand their first-class sporting and recreational infrastructure and programs that they already currently provide for the community. I'm satisfied that the community consultation that was undertaken was sufficient. Connecting Mackay website was one means of advertising the proposed land acquisition, and it attracted 1,600 visitors during the consultation period, and out of that there was only one objection to the sale of this particular parcel of land. Your Worship, in my opinion, this decision represents a really good outcome for our local community, and it continues to enhance Mackay's reputation for providing stellar sporting and recreational facilities.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Move on to the receipt of petitions 12.1, a petition for the sealing of Powell's Road at Marion. It's pretty well straightforward, that petition. Are there any questions around it? All we can do here is receive it and refer it to the CEO for a report to be prepared and bring it back to Council. You moving, Councillor Anglet?
Yes, I am.
And Councillor Green seconds. Councillor Anglet?
No, good to go.
There's no discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thank you. Tenders under 13.1, we've got a contractual arrangement tendering exemption for a third-party quality certification under ISO 9001. CEO, is there anything you want to say on this one?
No, only that we'll put it out to market on the 3-year cycle. If we go now, whoever comes in would need to undertake a full audit, which again is cost unnecessary in the cycle of things.
Everybody understand that? Are there any questions around this? No questions? Somebody like to move? Councillor May moves. Councillor Mann seconds. Councillor May? There's no discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. And we have 4 items of confidential reports. Before we do that, I missed a page. There you go. With no notified motions, with public participation we've done, I think. Is there any late business, councillors? Late business? We can do that at next meeting. Councillor Mann has applied for leave of absence, and we could for the next meeting. We can actually adopt that at the next meeting, which we might do. Any items of late business? Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to draw attention to the joint effort between the North Queensland Primary Health Limited and the Queensland Government for the community services promotion of services in Serena, and this is being done in conjunction with the Legend of Leagues event that's occurring next Friday and next Saturday. So on the Friday between 1 and 3 at Anzac Park near the council facilities down there, we have a number of service providers setting up stalls to be able to inform the community of the services that they provide to the Serena residents. And in attendance will be Kevin Campion, Robbie Cresbrook and Peter Gill. They'll be attending on that time between 1 and 3. And then on Saturday, the 4th of December, we have the League of Legends, Legends of League, match, and a number of other matches are taking place at the Ray Edwards Oval. So from a start time of 2:30 where we have under 16 boys, right through to the main event at 7 o'clock. So should be a great weekend of rugby league in Serena.
Thank you very much, Councillor May. Any other items of late business? No other items of late business? As I said before, confidential reports. They're all pretty well straightforward. Does anybody want to... You have a question, Councillor Jones? Somebody like to move that we close the meeting to the public? Councillor Jones moves. Councillor Green seconds.